next speaker is Dr. Shadaba Ahmed, who is consultant ENT surgeon and clinical lead at Royal Lancaster Infirmary.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers, particularly Dr. Chughtai, for arranging an excellent meeting which has spanned 2 days and captured our interest. My remit is to talk about advice and guidance. It's a relatively new application of telemedicine in the NHS. We know in the private sector, telemedicine, e-consultations, e-conversations globally are well known. We heard about Sehat Kahani yesterday, which is a similar kind of example. As clinical lead, I introduced advice and guidance in my department in 2014. Since we have a very good opportunity and good fortune to have a mixed international audience, I shall briefly explain the current NHS referral pathway, followed by the evidence base that is there to support advice and guidance, and I'll talk about my own data analysis. So I think British humor and satire wins where politicians lose, and the fact that there was an enormous waiting time for the patients to be seen in the NHS, the politicians finally devised a target, which I think has actually been in favor of delivery of service. And what we lovingly call the RTT is what drives every clinician and manager to deliver. And RTT is referral to treatment time. It is dictated without any allowance that from the moment the referral reaches the trust to the time the patient is treated, everybody has 18 weeks to get their act together. And it can be for what's also called the CAB, or the choose and book system, in which patients are identified to be suitable for a particular speciality and are referred directly into that speciality. Advice and guidance has a huge role to reduce the RTT and make suitable CAB referrals, and I shall speak about that in a minute. So what exactly is advice and guidance? Advice and guidance is a confidential, secure electronic system generated either by an email or by a telephone request. It is between primary care GPs and between secondary care consultants. So it's a senior clinician versus a senior clinician, and there is evidence that patient outcome is much, much better when there is senior management input. So that is the plinth and the basis of advice and guidance. The overarching principle is to improve patient care in a timely fashion by an appropriate specialist, and it aims to reduce inappropriate admissions as well. So advice and guidance is between primary care, the patient, and secondary care. The process is as follows. In my trust, we serve a population of 365,000 patients, and we have 55 GP practices. So each GP practice will have this kind of drop-down menu from which they will choose the trust and the speciality. They will then generate this conversation, which is directly linked to the software Lorenzo EPR, electronic patient record of the trust. In the message content, they will write clearly what they would like the clinician in the trust to look at, and they can request a telephone conversation as well. This is what pings into my inbox, and this same email will go to all the other consultants. So 5 of us are going to receive this email, and it depends upon the circumstances as to which one of us is going to take ownership of this conversation. Once somebody has taken ownership, you can only review the dialogue. You cannot add or subtract or comment on somebody else's conversation. There are issues with the time of the response, and we will discuss that as well, but it is a secure, confidential, almost instantaneous, low-cost, highly reliable system of obtaining an opinion from a specialist. So the purpose of advice and guidance is because there is a huge cost to the NHS if the RTT is breached. For all breached patients, the trust suffers a penalty. If the clinician in primary care can be provided advice or clarification for results and they can be directed to the appropriate specialty. The RTT, in the RTT, the referral to treatment time, the management is started much earlier, and which leaves plenty of time for management in secondary care, and penalties are avoided. So this is the purpose of advice and guidance. Needless to say, advice and guidance is a very useful source. It has been tried and tested throughout the UK now, and it is an educational resource for primary care. To give an example, if there is stubborn, for example, otitis externa, and I give some information to primary care, they hold onto it for future patients as well. It reduces the risk of inappropriate referrals, so there is no cancellation of patients, rebooking of patients, and I don't land up seeing a patient which should actually see maxillofacial, for example, or dermatology. I see patients who are more relevant to ENT, and that holds true for other specialities as well. We now have the ability for primary care to organize investigations such as radiology, and it is part of the permanent record. There is issues about tariff. For a new patient, we get £153. For advice and guidance, we get just £23. And there is payment by result as well in the background. This is the evidence which we heard from NHSI, NHSE yesterday, Department of Health, about the utility of telemedicine. In my trust, the winners are always the big core services like radiology and pathology. The object of our audit, I'm conscious of time, it was to explore the response time in which we actually replied to the GPs, because if it is responded in 10 days' time, it is of no value. How satisfied the GPs were, and this poignant gap in the middle is the patient, how useful it was for the patients, and which was the area of ENT, was it otology or laryngology or rhinology, which was of interest to the GPs, and how many GPs were using it. We started this in 2015, so the first cycle was for 6 months, and now it is, I have re-audited again. So initially there were 38 conversations, they are now 232. Alongside this, all the data that has been captured on the Lorenzo dashboard, which is our software system, have been analyzed. Initially, there were just under 20 GPs utilizing it. Now almost every other GP, more in Lancashire than Cumbria, used this system. This is again a chart of the conversations that have been open to date. Initially, there were about 90% of patients that primary care would have sent on to us, and by now it has been reduced to something like 60%. The conversations' main concerns have been around laryngology, because neck lumps, cancer, hoarseness, dysphagia are the main worries for primary care. The satisfaction rate in 2015 was somewhere near 58%. It is now 90%, and that's 95 conversations, because advice and guidance is an ongoing dialogue, but every conversation that you respond to is always categorized as one conversation. So though there have been multiple responses, hence it's 90% now. And 70% have already avoided being referred into primary care, into secondary care from primary care. And the response time initially was something like 1 day. It is now down to less than 6 hours. We respond very quickly. So the summary is that it is an effective, instantaneous, reliable, senior clinician input for advice and guidance, which has been rolled out throughout the UK. Future development for ENT is the transmission of images, and hopefully it will bring down waiting times yet further. Thank you. Apologies as well.
Is there any question, or you want to take it in the tea break? Yes, please go ahead.
Just quickly, does your trust whose income
potentially generate from seeing the patient, and how do they feel about that or not?
Well, the volume of new referrals is as such that it has been calculated, and it's actually not detrimental to the trust to actually not see those patients, not pay a breach, and it's actually building very good rapport and relationship with primary care, which is priceless.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Shadaba.